If the world's great powers marched into your capital, claimed your streets, burned your libraries, and then sent you the bill, what would you do? That, in one hard sentence, is the drama of the Boxer Rebellion, 1899 to 1901. A collision between a battered empire and an 8-country coalition that arrived to restore order, then demanded a colossal indemnity for their trouble. It's a story of fists and rifles, mysticism and telegraphs, missionaries and mandarins, siege and spectacle, and it still echoes in China's politics and global memory today. Setting the fuse. By the turn of the 20th century, the northern provinces of China were simmering with unrest. A series of natural disasters, droughts, floods, crop failures, had ravaged the countryside, leaving many rural families destitute and resentful. At the same time, the imperial government of the China under the Empress Dowager Cixi and the Qing Dynasty was struggling to cope with decades of unequal treaties, foreign spheres of influence, and the advancing footprint of Western, Japanese, and missionary presence. The seeds of eruption were planted in this soil of desperation and foreign intrusion. According to Britannica, the uprising was an official-supported peasant uprising of 1900 that attempted to drive all foreigners from China. In this climate, there emerged a secret society calling itself the Yihequan, the Righteous and Harmonious Fists. These young men, many from the countryside, practiced martial arts, believed in spiritual invulnerability, and directed their anger at foreign missionaries, Chinese converts to Christianity, railroads cutting across farmlands, and other potent symbols of foreign encroachment. Western observers, seeing their practices, dubbed them Boxers, and the name stuck. Initially, the Boxers were strictly anti-foreign, rather than explicitly anti-dynastic. They attacked Christian converts and foreigners, not necessarily the Qing regime. Over time, however, the dynastic court began to see an opportunity to harness the popular movement for its own survival, creating a volatile alliance of convenience, the Siege of Beijing. By June 1900, the situation in the capital region exploded. The Boxers, joined or at least tolerated by elements of the Qing military, converged in Beijing and its environs. On June 21st, the Empress Dowager issued an imperial decree declaring hostilities against the foreign powers, effectively a declaration of war, ordering the regular army to join the Boxers in attacking foreign interests. Foreign legations, diplomatic compounds, and Chinese Christians took shelter inside the legation quarter in Beijing. The siege lasted from June 20th to August 14th, some 55 days with defenders under fire, low on supplies, and facing daily horrors. The defenders of the legation quarter were a ragtag mix: foreign diplomats, soldiers, and sailors from many countries, plus some Chinese Christians who fled into the compound. One oft-repeated figure details about 473 foreign civilians, 409 foreign guards, and about 3,000 Chinese Christian refugees. On the city's side, Boxers and Qing troops attacked, tunneled, set fires. One notable blaze engulfed the Hanlin Academy, a repository of Chinese learning, and drilled inward toward the legation walls. Inside, the defenders improvised. Machine guns pumped out fire. A cannon assembled from parts of various nationalities bore witness to the sometimes absurd resourcefulness of that desperate defense. Outside the walls, for ordinary Beijingers and for the Chinese Christians in hiding, the spectacle was nightmarish. Shells exploded across alleys, starvation pressed in, and the foreign-Qing conflict rippled into every corner of life. The court itself was deeply divided. Some senior officials advocated restraint, others combated the Boxers, still others poured fuel on the fire. The result? Confusion, mixed orders, and a catastrophe in the making. Enter the Eight-Nation Alliance. With the siege still ongoing and the situation spiraling, foreign powers mobilized troops to intervene. They formed what became known as the Eight-Nation Alliance, a coalition of 8 countries: Japan, Russia, Britain, France, United States, Germany, Italy, Austria-Hungary, that sent soldiers to China in order to relieve their nationals and protect their interests. The alliance numbered roughly 45,000 to 51,000 troops according to various sources. Japan provided the largest contingent. These forces fought their way inland, captured strategic fortresses, for example the Taku forts near Tianjin, and by mid-August entered Beijing itself, finally lifting the legation siege on August 14th. When the Allied soldiers arrived in the city, they were not greeted as liberators by all. The occupation that followed was messy and brutal. Looting, reprisals, and negotiated surrenders blended together in a chaotic patchwork. Cultural treasures were broken into, palaces plundered, and the sense of imperial China devastated. One commentator notes that in 1900, the plunder by the Eight-Nation Alliance was much more organized and few artifacts escaped the looters. For the Qing court, the presence of foreign troops on their soil was a shameful symbol of weakness. For ordinary Chinese, the sight of foreigners dancing on the walls of Beijing was an unforgettable humiliation. The Boxer Protocol and the aftershock. Once the fighting ended, diplomacy began in earnest, but under terms dictated by force. On September 7, 1901, the Qing court signed the Boxer Protocol, also known as the Beijing Settlement. Under its terms, China had to pay an indemnity of 450 million taels of silver, to be paid over 39 years at 4% interest, bringing the total owed to nearly double. The protocol also required China to execute high-level officials who had supported the rebellion, allow foreign troops to be stationed at key routes, and permit foreign nationals to travel freely and send in reinforcements. The effect was clear: sovereignty had been deeply compromised. The financial burden alone was crushing for a government already weakened. Paying for decades the penalty of a conflict so costly in human and cultural terms entrenched the view among reformers and revolutionaries that the Qing Dynasty had lost its legitimacy. Meanwhile, some of that indemnity found an unexpected purpose. For example, the United States returned part of its share to fund scholarships for Chinese students to study abroad, and thus helped found the institution that became Tsinghua University. The irony is that a punitive settlement seeded future Chinese talent and reformers. Complexities and contradictions. The story of the Boxer Rebellion resists simple binaries of Chinese versus foreigners. On the Chinese side, there was the Boxer movement, rural, spontaneous, violent, but also parts of the Qing military and court who tried to restrain the excesses or maintain neutrality. Some provincial governors, especially in the south, refused to follow the court's war declaration and instead negotiated local truces with the foreigners. Meanwhile, in the Foreign Alliance, there was no single unified command or unified war aim beyond restore privileges and protect nationals. The coalition operated more as a set of national contingents with different priorities rather than one seamlessly integrated army. Even the Boxers had complex motivations. Peasant militias, yes, but also groups motivated by spiritual beliefs, invisible cloth, invulnerability to bullets, in a moment of cultural collision where martial tradition confronted modern weaponry. Observers noted that the Boxers' slogan was often "support the Qing, destroy the foreign," rather than overthrow the dynasty. The Qing court's decision to back the Boxers in June 1900 was both ideological and strategic, attempting to marshal popular anti-foreign fervor in a moment of desperation. But the result was sweeping chaos. Why it still matters. The legacy of the Boxer Rebellion is far from ancient history. It continues to echo. The conflict epitomized the clash between imperial foreign powers and a China whose sovereignty was under siege from inside and out. The intervention by the Eight Nations set precedents for military intervention, indemnity demands, political humiliation, and cultural plunder that would resurface in many forms across the 20th century and beyond. As one recent summary puts it, the rebellion strengthened nationalist sentiments of the Chinese and shaped China's later identity and approach to modernization. In China today, the memory of national humiliation includes the Boxer era as one of its motifs. The idea that foreign troops once marched into Beijing, that cultural treasures were carted off, and that a dynasty paid a lifetime debt for a moment of anti-foreign rage has become part of the story the People's Republic tells about itself. At the same time, the foreign side offers sobering lessons about power, intervention, and the unintended consequences of using force to protect interests. The looting, the cultural destruction, the reprisals all make clear that a military victory does not erase the moral and historical costs. And that was the story of the Boxer Rebellion, when China took on 8 global superpowers and changed history forever. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next one.